Excellent. Okay, so hi everyone and welcome. My name is Victoria Barnett. I am one of the contractors of the Design Justice Network, and you are joining us today to hear from some Design Justice members. This is a member story event and a welcome to the network. So I will start the first 10 minutes just by introducing the network, a little bit of the history. And then as soon as I finish that, I will pass us on to our special guests who are going to talk about the Design Justice Pedagogy Summit, Embedding Equity and Justice into Academic Courses. And I'll be really excited to introduce them after I do the welcome to the network. Oops. So the slides here are available for you today or anytime later if you want to refer to them. The link is there, and also Renee Joy, my colleague, is adding it into the chat for you, so you'll be able to access them and see them later. And I will start by doing an introduction to myself and Renee Joy. So my name is Victoria. I use she and her pronouns. I'm part of the Design Justice node in Toronto. I also do a lot of support for members as part of the network, part of our nodes and working groups. And I also work on the side as a freelance digital graphic and web designer. I'm currently in Colombia, Bogota, which is the territories of the Muisca peoples here in Colombia. Oops, and I clicked too fast. And my colleague Renee Joy is here. She will be assisting with all the chat and questions and answers. So if anything comes up, you can either private message her or just write in the chat and one of us will take care of it. But these are all the amazing, beautiful things that she does. And she works as our communication specialist to help get the word out about what's going on in the network and continue to help share different stories about our members. And so now I'll start by doing the introduction to the network, into the introduction to Design Justice. If you've never joined a Design Justice event before, this is why we start with this part, just to give a brief introduction, and then we jump into our main course. So what is Design Justice? What you see here on the screen, well, as asking that, what is Design Justice? You also see the Design Justice book by Sasha Costanza-Chuck, Community-Led Practices to Build the Worlds We Need, and our Intro to DJN resource. It's a resource you can download and access later if you'd like to look up more or understand more. But I'm going to introduce a little bit about the concept of design justice, and also silence my phone. My apologies. Oops. So design justice is a framework of analysis of how design of images, objects, the built environment, interfaces, and socio-technical systems, a lot of different things, influence the distribution of benefits and burdens between various groups of people. What does that mean? I will explain. And before, as I explained, I also want to recognize that design justice didn't grow out of a hat yesterday or 10 years ago when it started. There are a lot of amazing people, organizations, theories of thought that this was inspired by and is historically rooted in. And a lot of those are links here that you can see on the screen: Allied Media Conference, Allied Media Projects, Digital Justice Coalition, Black feminist thought and disability justice movements. And there's a lot of that you could read about in the opening chapter of the Design Justice book, which is a resource that you can access freely online. You can also buy as a book. But we just like to acknowledge that it's really important that our history comes from a lot of histories, a lot of philosophies, and it's really always important to talk about that. So what you see here on the screen is a black circle with some pink dots in it, and then some green dots on the outside, on the periphery. This is a standard design process, a representation of a standard design process. And so in a standard design process, those processes tend to center those who are already the most powerful, whereas the others on the periphery are on the periphery of the process, not involved in the process. So the pink dots here on the center of that circle represent those with more power, and the green dots represent those who have been left out of the design process. When we're talking about design justice, we are asking some of these really fundamental questions about who was involved in the design process, who was harmed, and who benefited from that process. We're talking about distributive justice, or the way that people are able to be involved in set up process, and the process of it, the procedural justice side of it. So what does that mean? When we look at this, what you see on the screen here is benefits in the center, a lot of arrows pointing to more powerful, and one arrow pointing to the less powerful. So this is that idea I was talking about, where people who have more power tend to get more of the benefits of any sort of design process. If we were just talking about a typical company, the CEO, the people who are at the highest levels, are the people who have the most power, and therefore in any sort of design process, if we're talking about the construction of a new building, or our cell phones, the process of building our cell phones, or the process of where we get our coffee from, or our tea and different products every day, the people who have the most process tend to get more benefits, more things out of that process, and people in less power. So in a giant company, the people working at the very bottom, maybe in the factories, maybe the people mining the products that go into the factories, they have the least amount of power and tend to get the least amount of benefits, if even any. And it's vice versa for the harm. So the people who have more power, those CEOs, those people at the top, tend to get very little, if any, harms. And those who have the least amount of power in the process tend to get more harms, more terrible things that happen to them in any set process. So when we're talking about design justice, what we're talking about is that distributive justice, and expanding the lived experience, expanding the process for the people of the community where the design is going to take place. So in this image, it's the black circle again, and the green dots that were on the outside before are now on the center, and the pink dots are still inside of the circle because everybody is still involved in the process. But the community, the green dots, the people who are normally left out of that process, are now on the center. They are the ones being centered in the design process in order to make it what it is needed to be for them, depending on what the project is. So design justice in general, and the network, it's a growing community of practice that focuses on this, what we were just talking about, the equitable distribution of the benefits and the burdens, allowing for meaningful participation in decisions, anything around the design, and really importantly, the recognition of community-based, Indigenous, and diasporic design traditions, knowledge, and practices. And so now I'll just briefly talk about the Design Justice Network. So all of you probably heard about this through the Design Justice Network, either social media or an email, or someone passed it on to you. But the network is a community of a lot of people who have either signed on to the principles and or are using them in their own work, are people who are members of the network. So the image that you see here on screen is a picture from 2015. It was at a conference, which is called the Allied Media Conference. It was a annual and then a biannual conference that took place every year in Detroit, Michigan, so in the United States. And what you see here on screen is a group of about 30 different designers, not all in the picture. Obviously, you can see about 20 here, but about 30 different artists, designers, technologists, community organizers, people who took part in this workshop, which was called Generating Shared Principles for Design Justice. And the goal of that workshop was to move beyond the ideas of design for social impact or design for good. And the idea was to challenge designers to think about how their good intentions, while good intentioned, are not always enough to ensure that a design process becomes something, a tool for liberation, or something that is justice-based. And part of that workshop was also to develop principles that could help practitioners or people in general be able to implement or reduce the reproduction of existing inequalities in any set design process. So I said in that room were designers, were architects, were community organizers, were technologists, and all of them came together to talk about that and come up with the principles that we see today. And so in the years between 2015 and 2018, that workshop happened, and then the principles were kind of written, rewritten, designed, changed around by different people. In the second photo that says 2016 next to it, there's two members of the network who are editing and re-editing and changing the words around. And that was at a network, a big conference where that occurred. And then over the next couple of years, the principles changed a little bit here and there, and were officially launched in 2018 as the 10 design justice principles that you can see and sign on to today. One important aspect of the principles is that they can and they should change with the times, when something else is needed, when something's missing. And we have a really cool example of some of our members who were actually, who actually added an 11th principle when they were doing translation work on the principles. And it's in Hindustani, the language Hindustani, they added an 11th principle because something was missing based on the culture and the traditions. But these are the 10 here. I'm not going to read all of them, but I'll read a couple. Number 6, we believe that everyone is an expert based on their own lived experience, and we all have unique and brilliant contributions to the design process. Number 7, we share design knowledge and tools with our communities. And number 10, it's my favorite. Before seeking new design solutions, we look for what is already working at the community level, and we honor and uplift traditional, indigenous, and local knowledge and practices. So these are the 10 principles that exist today that came out of that original workshop that happened. And now thousands and thousands of people have signed on. I think it's more than 3,000 or 4,000 now, but people are signing on and using it in their work, which is really, really cool to see. And it's become an international network of people from all over the world. And just a little bit more about the network before I pass it over to our awesome members. So this is just slightly a little bit about the structure of how the network is. So you can see a black circle and then a white dotted line. On the outside, you see the word signatories. Those are folks who have read and signed on to the principles. On our website, you can read them and click a sign on button. And that just means you're signing on. I agree with these things. On the inside of the dotted line, you see the word members. Members are folks that have signed on to the principles and also have joined the network in some other shape or form, whether it's that they've given a monthly or a yearly or some kind of donation to the network, or they've also joined the inner circles that you can see, local nodes, working groups, or the steering committee. And local nodes and working groups are different ways of involvement that you can, as a member or as someone who's a signatory, join and be involved in different design justice processes. Local nodes are local to a specific area. So it could be a city, it could be an entire continent, it could be a country, for example, but we have different local nodes at different levels. And then working groups are more focused on a specific topic or a specific theme. So we have a communications and storytelling working group. We have principles at work, using the principles at work working group. And these are ways that members have joined and been involved. And of course, the steering committee, who makes sort of the administrative decisions on behalf of the network. And so as I was speaking, some of the ways that you can get involved is signing on to the principles, becoming a signatory, becoming a member, being involved in one of those things I spoke about, just subscribing to our newsletter, seeing what's going on in the world, what types of news we're sharing, attending events like we're at together right now, or joining one of the other things, or following us on one of our social media channels. Lots of ways you can choose whichever feels best to you all. Another important thing I'll point out is that we do have a lot of free resources online on our website. There's the book that I mentioned at the beginning, and I forget if I mentioned, but you can review it and read it fully online. Part of it has been translated also into Spanish. So for folks that are Spanish speaking or primary language of Spanish, it exists in Spanish as well. We have various zines from various years that have different stories about design justice, people using design justice, different parts of our members who've contributed in various ways. And then we have something called activities, which is sometimes we lead workshops that we run activities. And so we have some activities that you can download and use in your own work, if that sounds interesting. And then there are a few more ways that people just generally volunteer, whether it's supporting by doing a translation. We've got over, I think, 16 different translations in different languages of the design justice principles. Our mission and vision and other things are available for translation too, lots of things. On our website, we just have a Google translation tool so that it's more accessible to people, but we also recognize that it doesn't always do the translation exactly 100%, but it's a work in progress. And then just different ways of supporting either communications or attending events and helping support with notes or joining. A lot of different ways to be involved if anything is of interest. I am almost done, but this is a little bit more about us. I won't read the whole thing, but it's important to point out that the mission, vision, and intentions of the Design Justice Network was something that was a process that started with the steering committee and the contractors, but was expanded, and our design justice members heavily contributed, gave feedback, gave ideas, which shaped the mission and vision and intentions that exist today. And the design justice membership base is super important and really, really important to the contractors and the folks that are involved. And we always recognize that they've done amazing things to make all of this stuff possible. Just the fact that y'all are here today. So to finally just highlight, you can become a signatory or join as a member today or someday in the future if you're really interested. And now I would like to pass it over to our special guests. And I'm going to introduce them first before I pass it over to them. And you guys can start getting technologically set up if you're ready. But we have three special guests today, three of our members, part of the network. Actually, I should explain a member, just the sort of process of a member. A lot of people ask us, like, how do I join as a member? Where does this money go? And the process of becoming a member of Design Justice is evolving, has evolved, it's evolving, and it's a pay what you can fee or a volunteer-based contribution in some way. But what's most important for the network is to make it as accessible, as easy as possible for people to join and become members. But when folks join as paid members, what it helps support is just folks being in community with each other, in alignment with the principles, because all of our members have signed on to the principles, and creates a space of care and safety. So the idea isn't to make lots of money, it's just to create that sort of space and environment that keeps people safe, and also directly support the work that a lot of our members are doing. And to that regard, I will introduce our lovely, I'll introduce what they're going to talk about first, and then I'll introduce our members. Do you all want me to read your full bio, or do you just want to say a few words about yourself, maybe?
We can just say a few words about ourselves.
Okay, I think that's better because they have long, beautiful bios, but I'll be talking too long. So yeah, I'll just say what they're going to talk about, although you already are familiar because you're here, which is exciting. But in this story, they're going to discuss the Design Pedagogy Summit, where instructors from academia, industry, and nonprofits came together to learn about design justice in design pedagogy and to work on embedding equity and justice into their courses. The summit included panels, interactive activities, and support for instructors in reflecting on this content and embedding it in their courses. They're going to share some materials and insights, but they're also looking for a wider discussion of how this can be applied in educational contexts. And also they are going to be hosting some really cool workshops later on in February for us. So we'll introduce it more later at the end, but hopefully you'll want to join them for some more cool stuff at the end. And I pass it over to the three of you, and I'll let you introduce yourselves. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for the introduction. So we'll just each say a few words about ourselves and then jump in. So I'm Madhurima or Rima, and I'm a PhD candidate in mechanical engineering at MIT.
My name is Anastasia Ostrowski. I apologize, I have a cold, so my voice is a little off today. I may cough, so just bear with me, and I appreciate the patience. I just graduated with my PhD from MIT, and I will be an incoming assistant professor at Purdue University next year.
And my name is Jana Saadi. I'm also a PhD student in mechanical engineering department at MIT, and I'll actually be finishing my PhD at the end of the semester, hopefully, and then looking for opportunities in industry afterwards.
Fantastic. So we'll jump right into it. We wanted to start with land acknowledgement. So we'd like to acknowledge Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of the land and the enduring relationship that exists between them and their traditional territories. The land on which we sit is the traditional unceded territory of the Wampanoag Nation. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of their territory, and we honor and respect the many diverse Indigenous people connected from time immemorial to this land on which we now gather. So with that being said, I also want to acknowledge that the work that we're presenting here is kind of part of a broader effort of many, many people. And so here you can see images of some of the faces that have been involved with our project at various levels. So this is our whole team that's worked on a variety of design justice related projects. And I'll give a quick overview of some of the different projects that we've done before we dive into the details of the summit. So for us, there's been kind of 5 main areas that we've worked on. First has been a syllabus analysis here at MIT. And so this is kind of what we started with to get a baseline understanding of how design justice was or wasn't showing up in the existing pedagogy here on campus by looking at syllabi. And we know that, if any of you are instructors in any fashion, syllabi aren't always super representative of what's exactly happening in the day-to-day. So we followed this up with an instructor survey to hear directly from instructors. And one of the things that I'll kind of highlight there is that we're seeing a big difference in terms of engineering departments and non-engineering departments in terms of how they engage with this content. Engineering's engaging a lot less, and often saying that it's because that design justice related topics aren't relevant to what they're teaching. So that's something we're trying to interrogate with some of our work. The next thing we did was do some literature reviews kind of in that vein in some of our areas of expertise. So we've looked at design research in the context of engineering design and human robot interaction. And we're looking to expand that to a variety of other fields as well. The meat of what we'll talk about today is the summit, which is where we're thinking about, okay, now that we have a baseline understanding of what people are or aren't doing, how can we actually support them in doing more and create some community around folks who are interested in bringing design justice into design education and pedagogy. And the last sort of area that we're moving towards now actually is partnering with institutions to work on design capstones and design courses, and actually integrating design justice content into the design process in the way that it's taught to students. So that's something that, kind of looking towards the future, is going to be a big area of our work. So I'm excited about that in terms of operationalizing some of the things that we've found so far and actually making some change in coursework. So I'll turn it over to Jana to talk a little bit more about the summit.
Thank you, Rima. So yeah, I'll be talking about the summit, which we had in the summer of 2022. Next slide, please. Yep. So the main focus of the summit was to create a community of instructors that aim to foster design justice content in their work. It was also for us a research project to ask the question of how do we support equitable design in design education. Next slide. So here we'll just show a very quick video of an overview of what the summit was. And in this video, you'll see images of the speakers that we had, the participants as they were collaborating with each other, and some comments from the three of us as we facilitated the summit.
We're here today at the Design Justice Summit, which has been really exciting. And so this is the inaugural Design Justice Summit event that we ran here at the Media Lab with folks from actually across the country.
With any conference, the thing that's sort of the secret thing is the ability to meet people you didn't know before or are interested in what you are doing and bring different viewpoints. Even if you did like a virtual seminar, it's not the same sort of experience. It's just being with other people who have the same sort of orientation as you, but a different perspective.
As nodes in a larger and organically growing network, whereby the Design Justice Network principles are increasingly being used by people to spark change and in some cases to shift institutions.
We really wanted to create a space where we could support and really foster a generative environment around industry members and also instructors bringing design justice and incorporating it more into pedagogy, into workplace trainings, and different activities that engage people around design.
It's like really needed conversations. Like I think that I'm really impressed with the level of both like questions, but also the candor and the like authenticity in people's answers.
I've been re-inspired by coming to this year's summit to meet other people that I may have not met that are doing similar work in different industries or across academic institutions.
There are many forms of expertise that go into designing anything from a very simple artifact to a very complex system. That expertise doesn't always have to be in engineering or in the more traditional design disciplines. It can also be the expertise of a community member.
So what I really liked about the summit was the caliber and quality of the speakers and the kinds of issues that they were raising. I feel like you brought together a really diverse group of speakers who have a lot of expertise and passion for the work.
Within the groups, as walking around, overhearing some conversations, people just really willing to be vulnerable. And I think some things we've all learned here is you really need to be uncomfortable to make progress in this space.
And one of my favorite parts as an organizer of the event was just to see those organic connections happen and overhear people exchanging emails or making plans to meet up for coffee or visit one another's institutions in the near future.
Yeah, so as you can see from the video, I think a big part of the summit that we had was really to foster that environment and collaboration around design justice content, specifically in design engineering, whether it be in academia or in industry. So we had a total of 38 participants from universities, nonprofit organizations, and industry companies. And you can see some of the participants here in this picture where they're seated around in a round table, which was where we had a lot of participants throughout the summit trying to engage together. And next slide, please. Most of the participants, 33 of them, did participate in the research study that we had for the summit as well. And that they were largely instructors or those who were engaged in design education. And so just to give a quick overview of the summit, this was spread of activities over 3 days. So in the first day, we had, next slide please, a keynote speaker, which was actually one of the Design Justice Network's members, Wesley Taylor. And then we also had a reception to really start building and fostering that community. And on the second day, we had panels and workshops and also a keynote speaker. So this was really an opportunity for participants to start learning about some topics such as the challenges and opportunities in engaging equity, ethics, and justice, and how you can advocate for design justice when you are not in charge. And then, yeah, so these were just some images from the second day. So it was really an opportunity for us to share about our work. So in this image, you see the three of us presenting on some of the things that we've been working on. And on the next slide, you see an image of some of the panels that we've had, where we invited speakers that were working in this space, both from industry and academia, to talk about their experiences in this field of design justice, and how you can advocate for that in your own spaces. And then on the third day, we had a syllabus makeathon, which were activities dedicated to supporting instructors in making initial steps to bring design justice to their courses, and then also a policy envisioning activity to imagine the future of design justice in their own work. And so in the first activity, we had participants identify one thing that they would like to change in their course. And so here you see an image of all of the worksheets that they had, and we put them up on a board. And on the next slide, you'll see participants in the second activity doing a gallery walk and really trying to learn from each other of their ideas for how you could incorporate design justice into your own work. So really trying to make it a space to be inspired by other people's ideas and collaborating with them, and how you can maybe bring design justice into your own work. And then they went off and did that on their own, kind of reflected on that and did it in their own work in the third activity. And participants created goals around design justice, including and how you can include it at the department or institutional level. And really the focus of this, again, was to be as interactive as possible, to encourage discussion and to learn from each other. And so just to give a summary of how we split up the summit, the first 2 days was really about learning from both your panelists and your peers. And then the last day was putting all of that learning into practice and collaborating with others to really think about and reflect how you could bring design justice into your own work. And so now I'll pass it off to Anastasia, who will talk about our reflections on the summit and how we think to move forward in the future.
Thanks. Yes, I'm going to be talking a little bit about things that were coming out from the summit and sort of some of the things we were hearing from participants and also seeing and how they were thinking about changing their coursework. So the first thing that we found in our work was an emphasis around community collaboration. People were really invested in continuing the community bonds that they developed in the summit, but also in their departments, at their schools, in their own communities, to really help build up collaboration for embedding equity and justice into coursework. For their second thing that we saw a lot of, we saw that there was a look at not only like community collaboration within an institution or within their organization, it was also a focus on engaging with those outside the community, but whose designs will be impact, kind of like Victoria was talking about before. Design justice is about looking and engaging everyone. And so this was a really big focus and thinking about participatory design or co-design. The third thing that we were learning and seeing is that people were figuring out ways to make changes to their courses, and they were able to take very concrete things such as redoing their reading list so there are more diverse perspectives, or reshaping who do they collaborate with for student projects and how can they make those engagements more equitable. The next thing we learned was an emphasis just around, there was a lot of humbleness and just recognition of, I don't know everything and there is a lot for me to learn, but there's a lot of resources that I can use to learn from, including my peers. The next thing that we learned from the summit was just people had a lot of reflections, contemplation, and humility. And we're really using the summit as a way to focus on those and really understand like where may their strengths be, but maybe where do they not have strengths and how can they grow in that and really use their networks to support design justice. And lastly, the other learning we wanted to share is around implementation and integration. So it was really exciting to see people from the summit say, I am going to redo my reading list. Like I can do that myself, but also the idea of I want to make change in my department and here's how I will be implementing these changes. So those are sort of the reflections and changes that people were really talking about and how they wanted to build the future. So then on our next slide, we did a really fun activity at the end of our summit where we had everyone complete a postcard that's shown in the bottom right of the slide. And there were 3 prompts. It said, I will, and then they could fill that in. It said, we should, and then it says, don't forget. And then we actually mailed these back to people about 3 months after the summit, so they could get a refresher of what they were really thinking about in that moment. So we just wanted to share some of the don't forgets. So one of them included, this is a long-term work. Use the moment to iterate and keep enduring to make this work sustainable. Another one was stay the course. Don't sweat the small stuff. It's all small stuff. The next one was provide value to communities rather than extract value for research. And I think there's one more. And the last one was spread the word. So these are just some of the things that people are really holding on to at the end of this event. And then lastly, we just wanted to leave you with 4 things that were kind of our takeaways from the summit before we kind of wrap up. The first one is we were able to find strategies for embedding design justice into higher education design courses. So we're happy to chat more of those, but those were really sourced from what people at the summit were really highlighting as how they would change their courses. The next takeaway we have is there were the goals and aspirations for the future of higher education design courses. So everyone at the summit was very invested in bringing in design justice and really making that a focus of design courses and not sort of this tangential thing, which we may often see in design courses currently. The third takeaway was we found tools and materials that can really support design justice implementation, and we're really excited to be sharing those with you. And then lastly, we were able to find that the summit format can be very effective in a matter of supporting instructors, not only in giving them strategies for how to embed it in their courses, but helping create an impact or like a community where they can kind of have impact together, which was really exciting because oftentimes we found that people may be the only one in their department who wants to engage or the only one in their organization. So it was great to see that events like this can have a lot of power. And then lastly, we just want to leave you with a fun thing. So as Victoria mentioned, we're working to open source all our protocols for these different materials that we did during these different activities we did in the summit for bringing design justice into coursework, whether that's in, a higher education setting or another setting. We had people from across many different organizations. And so we want to be using these tools and open sourcing them for everyone to use. So as part of that process, we want to, we're holding workshops in mid-February. Well, there's 2 sessions where the activities are split across, where we are going to be sort of running through another sort of like pilot version of the open source tools to gain some feedback before they go fully open source. But we'd love to have you join us and work on any of the courses or activities that you're really excited about doing. And there will be 2 sessions of those workshops, and we'll have more information about that probably in January. But we just wanted to let you know to keep an eye out since these will be happening around mid-February of next year. And with that, we want to say thank you so much for listening to us, and we're happy to engage in a discussion and dialogue about any topics that really were very salient to you and really make you excited.
Thank you so much. There was a lot of chat. There was a lot of things in the chat going on. Congratulations and thank yous. But now is the time for any questions. We can start, like if anyone would like to write a question in the chat and one of us can read it out, I'll read it out and facilitate that. But also if anyone is interested in just saying a question out loud, audio based, feel free to unmute yourself now and ask away. And Renee Joy is posting the bios and information about all of our presenters now. Yeah, I think I see Elizabeth wants to ask a question, maybe.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth de la Rosa, and I'm joining y'all from San Antonio, Texas. So we're interested in starting a design justice node. We talked to Victoria a few weeks back, and we want to nestle or to start some of those activities within our university setting. So I was wondering, ladies, if this summit that you guys put together, was this part of like your node in your city, or was it done separately? Like how did that come to be?
Yeah, so we there is a Boston node, but I don't think it was very active when the summit was getting started. And so we did this separately of the node, and we got this started through actually funding we were able to obtain. So we applied for a grant that was able to fund this. And we kind of felt it was like the next logical step, because we had, syllabi saying we're not seeing design justice topics. We had instructors saying we don't have resources or support. So it was kind of what we felt was the next logical step to see, well, can we build community? Like, can we kind of foster a space for instructors and people who are just, or even, past higher education, but just instructors generally in kind of supporting this. So it wasn't done tied to a node. And I think that's something like we're really working in the future to also think more about, is like, how can we like partner more with a node in these type of initiatives?
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to just say something, ask something audio based?
Hello, my name is Tanya Schlatter. I'm a professor of design at Wheaton College in Norton, Massachusetts. So thank you for this presentation. I think the summit sounds like a great experience, and I'm just wondering what the best way is to be involved in the future. If there's on the Slack, if there's a channel that is more related to this.
Yeah, good question. That's something that we've kind of been trying to figure out as well. And haven't found a great solution to. I think we'd be very open to starting a Slack channel around this or something like that. Because one of the things that we would like to do is kind of, if this is to become a recurring event in the future, which is the type of thing that we'd like to see, it's not so sustainable for the same group of people to do all the logistic organizing every single time. So it'd be nice also to maybe rotate institutions or rotate different host organizations where we can also get a glimpse into other folks, where people are doing design and where people are engaging with design justice, and have similar events at various places. So we should definitely connect if that's something that you'd be interested in, and we can talk about how to kind of make that happen on Slack as well.
Yeah, definitely. When I joined the education channel on the network, this is the kind of thing I was hoping to participate in. So I'm excited that it's happening. I just want to make sure to kind of align.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the big reasons we're also trying to make our resources open source, so that people who want to do some things like this in their own institutions, even if it's at a smaller level, they will have the resources to be able to do that. And definitely things we've been exploring with also is just looking at different venues to do this as well. So for example, we had like a mini workshop version in the last IDTC conference with the American Society of Mechanical Engineers this past summer in August. And so I think those are other things as well where it can pop up, looking at the right venues to show this, to have this type of workshop as well.
Yeah, and I think as part of that, one of the things that we're working on with Victoria and part of open sourcing the materials is we want to make a Zine where it's like, how do you run a Design Justice Summit, or just like a suggestion of things, and have the materials so that if people want to do one in their communities, again, it kind of gives more like ownership, like people can use the material and run with it and kind of work with it, which I think it would be really exciting just to have those resources available. Because, like the mechanical engineering conference, right? That's like for a certain group of people, but there may be a whole other group of people in a different space that wants to do it too. So we think that's a good strategy moving forward to keep spreading and kind of using hopefully spreading news about the resources and supporting people in doing summit like things. I saw there's a bunch of questions popping right now. I think I saw Elizabeth, and then I saw Emily Jo, I saw you raise your hand. So Elizabeth asked, how will the team incorporate more student perspectives in the future? Yeah, something I don't think we initially like set out for students, but we ended up having undergraduate and graduate students participating. And a lot of them were thinking about it in the lens of like either they were TAing for a course, so they're looking to develop a course in their department, or even create change in their student organizations. So it was really exciting to see that we attracted students to come to the event. I do think there is, of course, a place for them at the events, and their perspectives are really valuable. So I think for future summits or for future events such as this, really encouraging participation from all levels is very crucial. And I think that also comes down to advertising too, and the messaging of who gets to make decisions for embedding design justice into courses. I don't know, Rima or Jana, if you want to add anything. Okay, you're good. Okay, Emily, would you like to ask your question?
So my question is about how recognizing that there's sort of a, I think, an access divide with people who are attending four-year universities and research institutions, and then a lot of design education that happens in boot camps, where there's literally not very much anything close to design justice happening other than maybe a footnote if you're lucky. And essentially, I'm wondering about the elements, like for your summit, I imagine the people who showed up were people who are already interested, like the people who are here are already interested, versus, you know, the people who design stuff for mountain bikes or whatever, as an example, who are really like, don't even have it as a frame of reference. And in the sort of boot camp space in particular, where people are really trying to go from not having a career to having a career in design. And I think it's really cool to hear about this from the mechanical engineering side. I have a design background, and I did a community college program that had no ethics whatsoever, not to mention design justice. So, but I have a liberal arts background before that, so I came with it. Still learning, obviously. So I'm curious about your perspective about the people who aren't already in the framework in the current design education space.
Yeah, maybe I can take that really quick. I mean, this is a classic question of how do you get to the people who aren't the ones who are excited about this and already showing up in the room. And I think that's something that probably all of us are thinking about. And part of that is the reason why we started with thinking about pedagogy of like what's showing up in people's classes that is not necessarily the exact content that they signed up for. I'll say that, you know, even in MIT mechanical engineering undergrad, I don't feel like we had a strong ethics component. And even though that's something that's required for accreditation, it's sort of, I can't tell you where we got it or if we got it at all. And so that's something where, you know, sometimes having these types of requirements or having this embedded into courses where everybody going through the curriculum is learning this somewhere is one way to get at the people who are going to then go off into industry and be doing this and may choose to never again engage with design justice, but at least they heard it once somewhere. That's kind of been an initial area. The bootcamp point that you bring up is really interesting. I don't think it's one that we've thought a lot about in the past, but that's something that I'd be excited to kind of think about further. It's something that I personally don't have any experience with or knowledge of. So maybe that's another opportunity for collaboration or partnership with those of you who have that experience.
Yeah. And then I saw, and I'm just going through the chat. So we have Amber and then Ali, I know you had your hand up. I don't know if we answered your question, but after Amber, we can go back to you if you still have your question. Amber says, hello, I'm curious about what you discovered in your syllabus review, an instructor survey about what people weren't doing as it relates to design justice in their pedagogy. What are some of the most interesting or surprising findings? I guess Rima, you and I could do the syllabus review, and then Jana, if you want to do, I think Jana had a hop off, maybe. Yeah, I think so. But we can take the instructor survey. Jana did a lot of work on the instructor survey, but we can tell you from like our sort of like her presenting the results to us, kind of what we thought. I think that for the syllabus review, something that was like surprising but not surprising at the same time is we found that in engineering courses, there's far less engagement with design justice topics than in non-engineering design courses. And specifically, we found a lot of design justice topics rooted in urban planning. So we had done 3 departments that were non-engineering, so urban planning, like human-computer interaction and architecture. And then we did mechanical engineering, computer science, and electrical engineering. And the third one was nuclear, I think, nuclear engineering. Yeah, so that's kind of what we saw, which was like, we wished for a different outcome, but that's kind of what it was. And like through personal experience, that kind of made sense. And then Rima, I don't know for the instructor survey, if you have anything that was most interesting or surprising for you.
Yeah, I mean, to follow on in the instructor survey, we saw that same difference because we thought, okay, maybe the engineering folks are just not putting this in their syllabus, but they're talking about it somewhere. And instead, what we saw is the engineering instructors would say, well, none of this is relevant to what I do. I think there's this idea of false objectivity of everything we do is like hard facts and math and science. And it's, you know, all the things that we would question about who are you actually impacting with the work that you're doing. And they're not necessarily seeing that as part of their responsibility as educators. But another thing that we saw is that a lot of people are interested, but just don't know how to do it or what to do. And so there was a really strong desire for community and a community around incorporating this into curriculum. And I think that's something I've heard echoed in the comments here as well. And it's something that we were hoping the summit could help bridge that gap of like, how do we take that first step if you're interested, but you feel overwhelmed?
And then Amber also responded to that question about where can you find results or insights. And so I dropped a link to the publication list that we have from the project. And I'm also ready to note that they should be open source if I've done my work well and freely available. If you can't find one, let me know and I will send it to you and make it sure it's on the website. Okay, cool. Okay, so I think we'll do Maro, who's the next in the chat, and then Eric, we can go over to you. Okay, so Maro says, I'm Maro, a service designer at the Italian Department of Digital Transformation and a student at the University of Palermo, excuse me. I was wondering if you have any examples of the application of design justice principles, methods, and pedagogy in government environments. Thank you. I don't know if Rima or Jenny went to that. I have a research example, but it's not really like in government, so I don't know.
The closest example that I'm aware of is the next person who's raised their hand, which is Eric Brubaker. So maybe he can share a little bit about how this might look in the government, because I personally don't have a lot of experience, but I know that he does.
Eric, do you want to take it away?
Oh, gosh. Well, hi, I'm Eric Brubaker. I work at NASA. I'm, of course, not speaking on behalf of them at the moment. And that is emblematic of the challenge I face in the federal government in this country, in that it's very hard to, in some settings, even use the word justice. So it's a very hard question to answer for me. We are trying, though, you know, there are aspects of the way we approach design that are very intending to be, in some ways, I believe, are more participatory, at least than the government has done design in the past. But, you know, NASA's mission, at least, is for the benefit of all humanity. And some of us interpret that to mean benefiting those who haven't been benefited before or who have been harmed before, and you know, attending to that. But everyone in the federal government, as you all know, kind of interprets things like that very differently. So it is a big challenge. I wanted to ask if I think something you said, Rima, made me wonder, as you were examining different curricula and meeting different instructors, if you were starting to see any patterns or any kind of themes around, I've heard some scholars call them threshold concepts, like concepts that are, you know, kind of gateway concepts to understanding what design justice is or how we might approach it, and kind of shifting our epistemology or kind of ways we think and do design For example, you mentioned kind of technology is not neutral, but did you see any themes or patterns kind of like that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We've been calling them kind of gateway concepts as well sometimes. And one of the big ones, especially in engineering, is sustainability. I think that's one that people have started to get on the same page about, the idea that this is important, that we're having an impact on the climate and so on. And so that's definitely one of those types of topics.
And just to circle back real quick to the government question that we had, another area of my research is looking at how to bring equitable design into technology design. And one of the areas that I'm working on is with policymakers to really teach them equitable design methods. And so I use design justice as a lot of like the theoretical backbone for that. And so that's like one way I think. And my long-term goal is to be integrating like people that will be impacted by technology, the technologists and policymakers. So I do think there are like movements for this getting in there, but I still think it's a really like wide open area that we've not yet fully had more equitable methods incorporated into the government or into those processes. And yes, I was just trying to think if there was any other gateways that we've seen in our work.
Yeah,
I think yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say, just based off of also what we've heard from instructors, other gateways that are like topics that are discussed a lot, especially after say 2020, with a lot of civil rights movements, has been like around racial justice or gender equality. I think a lot of those get discussed maybe individually, and I think one aspect that we didn't see a lot of is how maybe intersectionality of different identity groups could come together, but definitely something that a lot of classes have been incorporating a lot more has just been discussions around like ethnicity and gender in general speaking, and how that could relate to their own coursework specifically.
I'm just interjecting super quick, not to stop the conversation, but to say that it's now like at the hour. So I just want to say thanks to everyone for coming. Thanks for all of our member presenters. And if anyone has to drop out, please feel free. And just a reminder, we'll email the resources, we'll email the videos to you, and really appreciate having you here. But that being said, we can stay on a little longer. I just didn't want to stop anyone's time. So if we can, I don't know where we've left off in the questions, but feel free to keep going.
I do have to hop off for another meeting, but I'll put my email in the chat, and please feel free to reach out on Slack or via email, or however we're happy to continue to chat.
Yeah, I can stay on for a few more minutes and we can perhaps get through a few more questions. And then at the end, I'll also drop my email in the chat. But I think the next question is from Alice, who says, I'd love to hear about how to get past institutional hurdles or examples of advocating these wins. I am a grad student at UT Austin, Texas, and we're working amidst laws like SB 17 that ban diversity programs, trainings. Feels daunting. I think something's blocking on my screen for some of the text. But anyway, SB 17 on top of faculty and grad students feeling a bit strapped on capacity is a challenge, and I'd love to hear about experiences and wins. Yeah, I think this is an issue that is becoming more and more prevalent in terms of like, I know we were at a conference this past August, and there's a lot of professors that are, really preparing for like these laws and also these restrictions that may come down. And I heard someone say, which I think was a good way of putting this, that, what will happen is we will just change our language. We will talk about things in a different way to get around these things, which is not the best, but it was kind of very much the ethos, like, we're not going to stop. Like, we will find ways to discuss this and bring this into conversation because it is so important. So unfortunately, I don't have a lot of experiences and or wins with this right now. And I think our community, myself included, is still grappling with like, how do we deal with this changing, especially in curriculum. And as I'm like becoming a faculty member, I'm also thinking about that, especially because my work is very much in like equitable design and talking about social justice very openly. So yeah, I think it's an open question for me too. And I am really also wanting to learn from this community of how to approach these things. Jana, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts.
Yeah, I would say like the thing that helped us a lot, especially kicking the ground off at MIT, is just finding that community of people within your own organization that shares the same values and would be looking to do the same things. I think like when we had first started talking about it within our own group, we were like, oh, I didn't realize that so many people around me are interested in doing the same thing. So maybe we should form a group and start doing something. And so the natural way is to really start off with those who are interested, building some momentum through them, and then kind of being able to expand out after that.
I think I'm going to have to hop off, but I just dropped my email in the chat. So please reach out to us. We're happy to chat more. And like we said, we're really open to collaborations. We're really excited to collaborate more with the network. And we're always looking to learn and grow. So with that, thank you so much for listening and coming here today. We really appreciate it. And we hope to see some of you all at the workshops in February too.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your attention, and really the discussion that follows afterwards is always things that get us very excited to see other people are interested in this work as well.
And Michael, thank you for the book recommendation.
Are those workshops going to be virtual?
Yes, they will be virtual.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the presentation.
Yeah, thanks for attending and coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Very cool. Very nice. Cool. Did that go well, Victoria?
Yeah, I think it went really well.